and welcome to Casually Criterion. My name is Chris.
And my name is Justin. Casually Criterion is a weekly podcast where Chris and I watch a Criterion Collection film and talk about it, starting with Spine Number 1. Chris, this is our first episode since we've switched to covering a Criterion film every other week, and in between we have our off-week episodes. But this is a real Criterion film episode. And if you want to follow along with what our episodes are going to be and you know, talk to us about whatever, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at casualcriterion. And if you want to just email us directly, you can email us at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
And today's episode is Spine Number 8 and 9, another first for our podcast where instead of doing two John Woo movies back to back, we're just going to put them both together and discuss them together. Spine Number 8 and 9, The Killer and Hard Boiled by John Woo.
Woo.
John.
Woo. Yeah, it's interesting to talk about two films at once. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. And before we get into that, we'll cover a little bit of movie news. On our off-week episodes, we're going to do more of like the more popular mainstream probably news, but for our Criterion episodes, we're going to stick to news that's more related to Criterion. And of course, this week we had the announcements for March of 2018, the Criterions that are coming out then. So first up, we have coming out March 13th, Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence. And I have not seen this film, Chris.
Yeah, I really liked it. I like Martin Scorsese and Daniel Day-Lewis. It's kind of fitting that he's announced his retirement and they're going to come out with one of his performances. He doesn't have very many, it doesn't feel like. But yeah, I really enjoy this one. I'm ready to pick it up.
Yeah, this is actually one of the few Scorsese films that I haven't seen. Seen most of his other stuff, so you know, this will give me a reason to watch it. And it's only, you know, something like 30 years away now that we've switched to doing a film every other week. I don't know.
Yes,
that's quick math in my head. I could be wrong about that.
Sometime in 2047, we'll be watching this.
Yep. Can't wait. I guess there's an interview in here with Martin Scorsese talking about it. And I don't know if you've ever watched anything with Scorsese talking, but like I've watched a couple things where it's just him talking about films and film in general. And I always love it. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. The
documentaries, the Voyage to Italy, and then his documentary on the American cinema.
Yeah, this is what I've seen.
Yeah, and it's just, Martin Scorsese is so knowledgeable. I'd buy it, well, depending on how long the interview is, but I'm tempted to buy it just because of that interview, to hear what he has to say.
For sure. All right, next on the list, March 20th, we have two releases. A film called Baal. Baal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And that's directed by Volker Schlondorf. And it's a West German film. I don't know much about this film other than it's based on a Bertolt Brecht play. But otherwise, yeah. It came out in 1970. Chris, you know anything about this one?
Not particularly. I think that they did a lot of drugs, as far as I know. And they were very prolific, the Volker.
Yeah, and I guess one of the interesting points for me is that Rainer Werner Fassbinder, a director who's got some films on the Criterion Collection, none of which I've seen, acts in the movie, which I guess is kind of interesting.
That's why I was confused. I thought that Fassbinder was the director, but he just acts in it.
Just acts in it, and yeah. So I don't know. I guess I'd probably be more excited about it if I'd seen some of the Fassbinder films, but I've heard good things.
Now that we're doing the every other week thing, that might be something that we can do. It's like to kind of hit some of our blind spots, you know? We could do the Fassbinder or, you know, the German film and kind of watch a bunch of those.
Combine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm into that. The other release on the 20th of March is The Passion of Joan of Arc by Carl Theodor Dreyer. This one I have seen. Came out in 1928. And have you seen this one, Chris?
No.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. It's obviously the story of Joan of Arc's trial and her subsequent punishment. Spoiler alert.
For history.
But, yeah, it's a really interesting film in the way that it's shot. There's a lot of intense close-ups. It's got a really amazing performance from the lead actress. I want to say her name's Falconetti.
You got me beat.
Something like that. I'm sure we'll research it more. That's actually not that far away. It's actually a re-release of a film that was already on DVD, so it's Spine number 62. So we're not that far from that one.
About a year.
Yeah, roughly.
Well, now that we're doing every other week, it's going to be a little bit longer.
Yeah. Okay. The interesting thing about this film is it has a lot of different scores, and I guess the way the film was originally released was completely silent with no music whatsoever.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things when we were talking about it that really interested me, to watch it in complete silence. I don't know if that's something that I'm like. I don't know if that's something that would increase my pleasure of the movie or just make it harder to watch. But yeah, that would be very interesting to watch a movie completely without. Actually, when I was younger and I got into film, one of the advice I got from online somewhere was to learn film, watch it with the sound off, and then watch the same film again with just the sound, and it'll help you learn a lot about film.
Yeah,
so
at least like the visual,
yeah,
language part of it. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Well, I've watched this one completely silent. The first time I watched it, I actually thought I had like a broken copy, because it was when Netflix was a little more focused on like the DVD delivery before they got almost like fully online streaming. I got the DVD sent to me, and I thought there was something wrong with it, because I started playing it and there was no sound. But I researched it, and obviously that's the way it's intended to be seen. And then I watched it again in film school with the score. I don't really know that there was much of a difference for me. Like I don't know. I enjoyed it equally both times. I don't know that one made it better or worse or whatever. I know it was a little bit more watchable, I guess, with a score. It kind of helps you along, but looking back on it once you've seen it, like I don't necessarily.
Yeah, that reminds me of the first time I watched Braveheart. So this was back in the VHS days. So I watched Braveheart, and somehow the labels had gotten switched. So it'd be on the one it said Braveheart Part 1, and on the other one it said Braveheart Part 2. And the labels were switched. So I put Part 1 in, but it was really Part 2. And I thought, oh, well, how amazing. They don't even have credits on it. It just goes right into the movie.
And where does the film go from where it ends?
And then he dies halfway through the movie, and I was very confused as to what was happening. And then I put in the other one, and I think that's when I figured out that I had messed up.
I think I did that with Giant the first time I watched.
Oh yeah,
I watched that. I put in the second part, and it took me about 30 minutes to realize that I was missing a whole bunch of the story, and then I figured out. So I didn't quite make it all the way through that second half, but yeah, maybe I should come with a disclaimer on the DVD or VHS if you're still doing that.
Yeah, please stop watching VHS.
Yeah. Okay, so the next two releases, both coming out March 27th, are two films that I have not seen either. First is Women in Love by Ken Russell, who's a director I'm also unfamiliar with. I want to say I've heard his name before. He's maybe got some other stuff on the collection.
I think I get him mixed up with, what's the name of the guy that does the documentaries?
Ken Burns?
Ken Burns, yeah, that's who I think of.
Yeah. I might also be confusing him with Ken Loach, which I know is a director that I think has some stuff on Criterion Collection too. This might be Ken Russell's first entry into the collection, but who knows? It was filmed in 1969. I watched the trailer for it, and it seems pretty sexual.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be a fun one.
I don't think it's one to buy and watch with your parents or grandparents.
Or your kids.
Or your kids.
On your,
yeah.
Or maybe not even your wife. Just depending on your situation.
Yeah, but we'll see about that one. And the last one is The King of Jazz by John Murray Anderson, which is something that I've never heard of before, but it looks like it was an early sound movie.
Yeah, probably maybe the name's playing off the jazz singer a little bit. I'm not sure about that, but it looks like it's more of a variety type show where a lot of different people come on to sing. There might not be much of a story is kind of what I gathered.
Yeah, and I think I read that it has Bing Crosby in it when he's like real young.
Oh, okay.
So.
And a giant piano.
Yes, a giant blue piano, which is Also interesting, I think you were telling me that you didn't really know that there was color film at the time. I guess we're so used to films of that time being black and white, and maybe that's part of the significance, right?
Yeah, 1930. But they could do color back then. It was just like two tones. They couldn't do the full range, right? They could just do like one or two colors.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think that might be something we can look up when we cover this one, or maybe some other films from like that era. We'll figure it out. But yeah, I was kind of surprised about the color too. Although looking at the trailer, it does seem like it's a lot of like black, white, gray, and blue.
Yeah, it's monochrome or something like that, the color.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm excited about that one. I personally really, really like musicals. I do get annoyed sometimes with musicals when they have just like those random songs with like characters that aren't main characters in the movie. I like them to be the main characters doing the song and dance, but
yeah. I mean, I think as a general rule, like with action movies and musicals, whenever you do a song or you do an action sequence, it should further the story in some way, or like reveal something about the characters, which may be something we'll get into later.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, that's it for the March 2018 releases, and that's it for our movie news for this episode. So, you ready to get into some John Woo?
Woo!
Okay, so John Woo, The Killer and Hard Boiled. I guess this will be interesting. We'll kind of see how it goes, and this is our first time to talk about two films, so we may do a little bouncing back and forth. We may do it, so hopefully you can follow along. I think this might be one where it's like extra crucial to watch the film first, so or both the films plural,
or at
first.
least just read the synopsis. So, like, let's start here. What did you think of The Killer? Did you like it?
I did. It was a little difficult because it was hard to find to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And so we found kind of a more or less like a YouTube stream of it, and the quality was questionable. So it didn't really have like the look of some of the films that we've watched so far, which I've watched on Blu-ray or streamed in HD. So it was a little difficult to get past that. It seemed kind of lower quality, so I kind of tried really hard to like focus on the story, which is really melodramatic. It's certainly not my favorite film that we've watched so far.
No, it's definitely not one of my favorite films that we've watched. On the lower end of that, these probably both go there. And I don't know if it's because I watched a lot of crappy action movies from the 80s, so like I'm kind of done with it anyways. But yeah, these melodramatic is probably a good point. I used to see this girl, and she loved K-dramas, and so we'd watch K-dramas. I know this.
So what is a K-drama?
So K-drama is like basically it's the slang for like an Asian television drama, right? Like a soap opera kind of.
Okay.
And
I assume the K stood for Korean.
Yeah, I think that's where it started. But then there's Taiwanese, and I don't know if they go. If there's T dramas, but all I know is all I know. All I know them by is K drama, and it just kind of encompasses all Asian dramas, whether it's Japan or China or Hong Kong, Taiwan,
okay,
or Korea.
But yeah, so this reminded you of those?
Yeah, so a lot of times in these K-dramas, they're made fairly cheaply, right? And there's one song that they have, and they play through the whole series, and there's no other music besides that one song. And and it's not quite there, but they kind of go back to that one song that she's singing. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that happens a lot in K-dramas is they flash back to something that happened like 2 or 3 minutes ago. Like, in case you forgot, this is what's happening. Like they flash back to it. That's kind of why I was reminded of K-dramas so much. That happened a lot in this movie.
Yeah, and do you want to go into The Killer, or do you want to talk about how you felt about Hard Boiled?
Well,
Let's go into the killer?
Yeah, let's just go into the killer.
Okay.
And then we can talk about Hard-Boiled.
So for me, the first thing that I noticed like immediately when the film opened was the fact that he was like in a Catholic church and praying, and then we learned that he's an assassin, right?
Right.
Or was he praying, or was he was just kind of...
He feels at peace.
Yeah.
They don't really say that he's praying.
Yeah, so then his boss, or the guy that like hires him to kill people, comes in and, you know, gives him his guns and his equipment and tells him who he's going to kill. So we learn that he's an assassin right there. And later on in the film, he goes back to the Catholic Church, like when he's wounded, and they like fix his wounds
in the church,
up in the church, and of course, like the big finale of the movie takes place in the church. So I think that's something that like, immediately we kind of get this clash of ideas, right? We have a criminal, a hitman, an assassin who kills people with a church, right?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the symbolism. And I think John Woo, you know, like if you've seen his later movies, it's, you know, like these images that you put up on the screen that mean something else, like the statue of Mary there.
Yeah, they resonate with us on a level that's separate from the film. And he's kind of using our own feelings to bring us into the movie, I guess, or to give us like a third meaning. Yeah,
it's a signifier. It's telling us this man is he may be a criminal, but he is dealing with his moral issues, or, you know.
Yeah, and I just think that there's a lot of this sort of clash of ideas of like playing things against like what you would expect, I guess, like the criminal being at home in a Catholic church you wouldn't expect, and there's more of that, which we'll get into a little bit later. And
yeah, so the next, I guess, so he gets his mission from, you know, his counterpart, and he goes into a nightclub, which actually he has said that he was influenced by Jean-Pierre Melville. Like this film was influenced by him, and the moment where he sees the nightclub singer is a moment from Le Samurai, which is one of my favorite films.
There's very much Le Samurai type influence on the hero, or not only Le Samurai, but all the films that were influenced by Le Samurai as well, to have that sort of like silent, super cool anti-hero. Because it's also, you know, reminiscent of Sergio Leone's like characters, Charles Bronson in Once Upon a Time in the West, and obviously Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the whole Dollars trilogy. I think like that influence of Sergio Leone is like really apparent in the fact that Chow Yun-fat, who plays the main character, he's playing a harmonica here and there throughout the movie, which is like straight out of Western, out of Once Upon a Time in the West specifically.
Right. But so in this gunfight, when he kills his mark, he accidentally almost blinds this girl.
Yeah, I guess I didn't quite understand that. I don't know if it's like the low quality, but like it seemed like his shot like grazed her eyes or something.
No, I think it was that when he shot the gun, he was shooting at his enemy, and when he shot the gun, the like backfire or whatever like kind of went into her eyes, or she also had stitches in the eyes, so like it like kind of, I don't know.
So I don't know, the recoil of the gun hit her in the eye or something. I don't know. It was a little confusing. Yeah. I think if in a clearer version, we might have been able to tell. I'm not
sure that would have helped that much, because I don't know that it made a lot of sense in general, like in that sequence.
But I think that there's plenty to get upset about. I think if you're gonna want things to make sense in the movie,
right? And that's true, but we don't need to nitpick that. But so
he almost blinds her, and she ends up with like deteriorating eyesight that's like slowly getting worse and worse.
She needs a cornea transplant.
Yeah, she needs a cornea transplant, and Chow Yun-fat, or the main character, he feels bad for doing this, so he kind of goes and helps her out, starts hanging out with her.
Because she can't see him in a unique twist.
She can't see him well enough to realize that he's the guy that wounded her.
She remembers in his head who it is, but like she can't see him well enough to recognize him.
Yeah, until he vows to get her cornea transplant, and does the one last job, which is a bit of a trope now.
Yeah.
See that all the time. One last job and then I'm out.
Yeah.
And of course, it's never that easy. You can't quite just pull out.
What you got to do, I think, in these movies is, if it's your last job, you just don't tell anybody, because it seems like if it's your last job and you tell somebody, it's going to end badly, right? So
absolutely.
Just keep it to yourself that it's your last job, and keep going, and then walk away.
Yeah. Noted. If I ever get into a life of crime, and
what do you mean get
I
into?
need to, if I ever decide to get out of my life of crime.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Then so obviously his last job goes wrong. We're introduced to a cop character who's investigating one of the murders, right?
Mm-hmm. He's investigating
Is it the main shootout that happens at the beginning?
In the bar. And I think this is in both films, both Hard Boiled and The Killer, is something that happens a little bit less in Hard Boiled, but it's the bromance, right? Like these two men that are on the opposite sides of the law, but are essentially the same.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of bromance in Hard Boiled.
Yeah.
I don't know that it happens less or more. I might have to get like a stopwatch and rewatch the films and figure that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what I less of in Hard Boiled is that they're on opposite sides of the law. In Hard Boiled, they're on the same side of the law. It's just that one's undercover and one isn't.
Yeah. Yeah,
but they're both morally like upstanding people, except for the whole killing people, I guess.
Yeah.
Assassin. But they both kill people like rather indiscriminately. So they're just one has a badge.
Mm-hmm. So I don't remember when this happens in the movie exactly, but there's a part where a little girl gets shot, and that was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, well, that was the part where he does his last job, right? And then the cops are following him, and he's about to get away with it, right? He's walking away, but of course the gangsters can't let him, or the triad, we'll call him the triad, won't let him walk away. So they're about to ambush him.
Okay.
And then he waves to the little girl. And then the little girl actually lets him,
he sees her looking at something and notices that her gaze is distracted by something, which he then realizes is someone trying to kill him. This is after the big like assassination at the boat race, which I was actually like reading about the film, and in order to be able to shoot like around that boat race, they actually lied to I don't know who was in charge, the government or the Hong Kong Film Commission, I don't know, whoever's giving them permission to shoot and giving them permits, but they basically said that they were a documentary film crew. And we're filming this whole thing, and that's how they got a lot of those shots of that race.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then they just kind of filled it in prior to the race with like the shots of Chow Yun-fat and stuff, which I thought was funny.
Well, now might be a good time. They only had 90 days to film this movie, which is double what most movies got back then, from the studio. So, yeah. I mean, that's pretty miraculous on its own that it was 90 days and they had that boat shot.
Yeah, and well, I mean, action scenes in general take a long time to film. I mean, you know, I guess we can go to the story of when we shot my film. Then you were in the scene where you had to basically you bumped into a guy who gets offended. We'll leave the details slim, I guess. He gets offended and then he attacks you and throws you into a thing in a gas station, and then we cut away from that, right? And even just doing that segment and figuring out your choreography and how you were gonna get thrown into and blocking out the scene and stuff, we spent the majority of a night of filming doing that, and it's 6-7 seconds of the movie basically, maybe a little bit more, right? Filming that whole scene. So when you get into shooting action, there's so many angles and so much
coverage,
precaution, and it just takes a long time. So even for this movie, the amount of action in it, 90 days might have been a long time, but it still doesn't. I'm surprised that they got it done.
That's what I mean. I mean, 90 days I don't think is a long time.
I think not by today's standards with like the big blockbuster movies, the action superhero movies. Those, I mean, shoot for 180 days sometimes. They kind of have like unlimited shooting days. They always bring them back in for reshoots.
Yeah.
And while it's expensive, it's they have it. They can do it.
Almost every movie has reshoots now too. Like,
yeah.
We got to fix this. Anyways, back to the little girl.
Yes.
So she gets shot, which is.
It surprised me. I wasn't expecting. I thought like, oh, he's gonna like save her, and then.
But isn't this the thing that happens in both movies where they kind of use children in order to both ingratiate us to the hero, and like you just put a child in jeopardy, and we are invested in this child's
no matter who they are, whether we've met them before or not.
It's just a child, and we are. Oh no! Save the child.
Yeah, and that works, and it's I guess it's I've heard it referred to as save the cat.
Yeah,
there's the
George
whole.
Lucas is
it a George Lucas saying? I've not heard it attributed to him.
George Lucas said, or I remember, I'm going to butcher but he's basically like, audiences are stupid. All you have to do is like put a knife to a cat's throat, and they're going to be so concerned about that cat. So I heard about it. There's this whole script writing series of books called Save the Cat, and it's all based off the premise of if you have your hero do something like saving a cat, and then we're automatically on board with him, and we like him. And so it actually does.
It's just a thing. It's in a lot of films.
Yeah, so it does three things. It ingratiates us to him. So like if we were on the fence so far, he's already taken care of the blind girl, but that was his fault, the reason that she's going blind. But then it also allows the cop who is chasing him to also realize that maybe this killer isn't as bad as he thinks. It isn't the worst killer.
Yeah, and I don't think I was surprised at all that he took care of her or anything like that.
Right.
That's kind of what I expected. I guess it surprised me that the girl actually was hurt. Like, I actually kind of thought she died at first. But then
that's not funny, but
no, but then he picks her up and he takes her to the hospital. But I guess it just had a bit of a shock factor to me, and then I kind of felt a little bit more of like, I don't necessarily know what to expect from this movie. I don't necessarily know who's going to get shot and who's not.
I don't think I had that. I mean, like, somebody could get shot, but I don't think I ever thought that she was going to die. Because it wasn't that type of movie, But so he takes her to the hospital, and then they have a crazy standoff in the hospital. These got to be the worst cops ever, right? Like, just like pointing guns, there's just tons of innocent people around.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody who shoots a gun in this movie really cares about
innocent
being
bystanders.
Discreet bystanders, even being efficient.
Yeah, they're not very efficient at all.
They don't care. I think it's just like spray bullets everywhere.
Yeah.
Hope you hit the right person you're trying to hit.
Yeah, I think maybe our heroes have a little bit better aim, but ultimately, like,
that's what makes Chow Yun-Fat so good, is he can actually like hit people.
Yeah,
every now and then. That's why he's like the best killer ever.
The Stormtrooper-itis is what they've got.
Yeah. Oh man, I thought we were going to get by an episode without talking about Star Wars.
No.
Nah, never. Well, yeah. So they have that standoff scene, which is something that also happens in Hard Boiled, and so we can go ahead and knock it out now. But there's a couple of those scenes that are really good to me that I really liked. That was like, it's the good guy and the bad guy standing off pointing a gun, but there's innocent people nearby. Well, this type of scene happens in both of them, right?
Okay.
So like in this one, it's the little girls being operated on.
The doctor's like, ignore them.
yeah, and they just have to keep going about what they're doing, or like just kind of stand there, like while they have their standoff. And there's kind of a moment of like, well, we're not going to shoot each other, because there's these innocent people nearby. And it happens in Hard Boiled when the guy that has the eye patch on, it's like in the big shootout towards the end of Hard Boiled. him and is it Chow Yun-fat or is it the other guy?
It's the other guy.
It's the other guy.
Danny Lee.
Yeah, Lee is his last name. They have their guns pointed at each other, but between them is a group of hospital workers and patients that are innocent, and they both have this, like, without even saying anything, this is like look in their eyes of like, we're not gonna shoot each other. We're gonna let them get out of the way.
Which actually I was really disappointed in that scene. I know we're skipping to Hard Boiled, but in that scene, I wanted all the people to escape, right? I mean, and then I wanted this standoff. Like, so they both laid their guns on the floor, and then I wanted them to, like, do a Western, like, draw of the gun.
Yeah, like who can pick their gun up fastest
but
and
the bad
shoot the
guy
other person.
ruined that for us. So
He did. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right. So speaking of standoffs, let's skip ahead. So the hospital thing happens, and the cop finds the killer, or he doesn't find the killer. He finds the girl that he's trying to take care of, the one that's going blind. And I will say I didn't like either one of these movies very much, but in this moment I liked quite a bit. So the cop comes in, and Chow Yun-fat, I think, answers the door.
He comes into the girl's apartment.
Yeah, and Chow Yun-fat answers the door, and then they both have their guns drawn at each other, and then the girl comes up, and they, like, hide the guns underneath their arms. And so because she's going blind, so she can't see what's happening. And then they give each other nicknames, Runt and Shrimp Head.
Shrimp Head.
And I really enjoyed that moment because she can't see, and they're, like, having this, like, all this other stuff is going on while she's just, like, making tea.
Yeah, well, that's a great scene. Just because they can't, to pretend to be friends and come up with this.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just that moment's, like, full of suspense of like what's going to happen. I wish there had been more. Probably the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, I wish there had been more like that in the movie, more suspense as opposed to less shoot 'em up and more suspense like that. And then to add on top of that, the cop's partner comes in to the into the apartment through a window, and like they have to, like, kind of tone him down, and just meanwhile she's just oblivious.
Yeah, because, like, they don't want her to know that a third person has come in, so they've got to hide him entirely, basically.
Yeah, and then they're working together, but I thought that was a really good scene. The best scene of the movie.
So, and that's kind of around the point that our cop and our hero start to work together and
start to maybe see a little eye to eye.
Yeah, because they're attacked there by the people who are trying to kill Chow Yun-fat, and I don't think that he wants to kill Chow Yun-fat. He wants to arrest him.
Yeah,
right. Like he's not going to dole out justice on his own, right? Like, he's not going to be judge, jury, and executioner.
But I mean, he did that earlier in the movie. Like when the guy's he's on the streetcar, and he sees the guy on the other side of the streetcar, and he just shoots him as he stands up through the whole crowd. That's why he was in trouble at the very beginning.
But maybe he was trying to learn his lesson.
Okay, maybe he's learned his lesson
and not be that. I guess.
I think it would be more that he thinks that Chow Yun-fat is honorable in some way, that he's trying to take care of this girl. So he's like, I don't want to kill you. I see that you're an honorable person, and let me just arrest you.
Yeah, and so eventually, I think we can kind of go ahead and skip to the end, like the church. I don't know if there's anything in between that's like super super relevant that we need to get into, but they end up back at the church where he's supposed to meet with his boss, who's like going to give him his final payment so that he can then run off and get her cornea surgery. And of course the boss has been kind of like working with the criminals against his will. He's like, they basically have him, like, they own him, right? The criminals own him. So the criminals own, like, the guy who is paying Chow Yun-fat all the time, right?
Yeah, and his friend.
So they know that he's going to be at the church, and the girl, the cop, and Chow Yun-fat are waiting at the church, and of course the criminals bust in, and we have like the big shootout scene at the end of the movie. And I guess one thing that I noticed that I thought was interesting, and kind of goes with the clash of playing against, I guess, what you would expect is that Chow Yun-fat is in like complete white the whole time, and the cop is dressed in all black. which I think you might kind of expect the other way around.
Face Off does that too, I think. Where the costumes have meaning to them, But anyways, let's not get into Face Off.
Yeah. Face Off, also John Woo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that is an interesting touch to have your hero in all white, and I guess I guess in the context of the movie, it's expected.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, that's not what you'd think. And going with symbolism, there's a lot of doves.
Symbolism or just John Woo? I think that's a John Woo thing, isn't it? Like
I believe so. Yeah,
I feel like
doves all over the place.
Anytime John Woo makes a movie, he's like, where is in the budget for the doves? And he's like, I'm gonna need more budget there.
Yeah, all the doves fly south every time John Woo starts shooting a movie.
So let me ask you about. Just in general, over both movies, what do you think about the action sequences? Sometimes they have wow moments, but I don't think the wow moments really, for me, I just asked you a question, I'm going to answer it now.
Sure.
So the action sequences for me, they have these wow moments, like the motorcycle in Hard Boiled going into that guy. I think that's a really cool, fun moment, but I think that they are overly long. And I think at some point they don't necessarily, like in a musical, they don't further the plot except for that they have to get through this, and there's not a lot revealed about the characters. Like, can you think of a moment where they do?
No, I don't think so. We have bits and pieces within the action scenes where stuff happens, in Hardboiled there's a lot of stuff with like the babies and him trying to save the baby, that sort of thing. And then there is a moment in The Killer where, Chow Yun-fat actually gets shot when I think he's shot and killed. That when they're shooting him up, there's a shot where the bullets are also hitting the statue of Mary and destroying that. And I think there's a bit of this idea, at least like with that, the symbolism of the Mary statue being destroyed and him being part of the church. He's sort of the one criminal in the movie that has like this sort of code of honor and ethics. So, where he's taking care of the girl that he accidentally injured. He's, not backstabbing his boss like his boss is backstabbing him. There's a sense that he's the one criminal with like this code of ethics and honor. And with the shooting of the Mary statue, I thought that kind of symbolized like the end of that. Okay. As well.
Yeah, I could see that. And I actually think, let's talk about how he dies.
Yeah.
So,
well, we can go back to your question. Actually, okay. I was just saying that there's like those moments that you get where there are things that like are symbolic and pertain, but I think there's a lot of action for action's sake.
Yeah.
In this, and I do think that comes down to like personal opinion, which for me, I don't mind it too much. I guess it can be excessive. Like, what is the film that came out a few years ago, The Raid, where like that is an entire action set piece of them trying to like storm this building makes up like 95% of that movie.
Right.
And I did not like that movie. Like after about 45 minutes,
really?
I was kind of checked out. I was like, okay, this is too much. I don't have any break from this.
Yeah,
enough of a break.
I want to see that movie, and I've heard that it's really good. Like Judge Dredd, the remake, was kind of like that. It was basically kind of people complained about it being a ripoff of,
of The Raid.
Yeah, because he has to go through this one building, and there's lots of bad guys in it. But I think. I wish I had seen The Raid now.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Just imagine those action sequences at the end of The Killer and Hard Boiled and just make them an entire movie.
All right, well,
particularly the Hard Boiled one. Like, make the Hard Boiled one the end of a movie.
Oh, okay, because it's all
or the entire movie.
Hospital.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to move on from The Raid, and we'll have to watch it and maybe talk about it later.
Yeah, well, so I guess I feel also like the getting tired of action or like the action scenes feeling too long. There is a bit of like context, I think, to it that like this film came out in 89, Hard Boiled came out in 92. And at that point, those films coming over to America were kind of new to have like that gratuitous an amount of like action and violence. They were new to audiences at the time, at least, like just not the norm, I guess, because the big movies were things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones,
Die
which
Hard
aren't
came
violent.
out in '88, so it came out before.
I think it did. I mean, Die Hard is a lot of a guy sneaking around, and
but there's.
I don't think it's quite as violent and like
I think
full on action.
Yeah, full on action where it's like nonstop. I feel like these are more akin to like Steven Seagal and like Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, I think there's moments like that in Die Hard, and you know, John Woo being influenced by Leone and Peckinpah and some of those more violent people. Like there's moments in those films where like those films kind of crescendo to those moments, right? And
that's what's missing from these is the moment where everybody's staring at each other and who's going to draw first. Like that's kind of why I was so disappointed in Hard Boiled, because they had laid their guns down, and that's the Leone moment. You know, they laid their guns down, everybody leaves, and then they just stare at each other, and then they, you know, like they draw. You know, like that's like I think that's what's missing from these movies is that like that suspense that leads up to the crescendo.
Yeah. And I guess do you think that having seen so much action after that, like you know, with shortly after this film, you know, Tarantino hit it big in like the 90s, and like films became like really violent after him, and of course John Woo too. John Woo was over here making films in America in the 90s that were violent as well. Like, do you think seeing that sort of action so much since then, because it became like mainstream,
right?
Like you know, there's a bit of Michael Bay.
I think Michael Bay
is influenced by
very influenced
John Woo, and by a bit,
yeah.
I probably mean a lot.
Yeah.
I guess.
Incomprehensible action sequences, I think, is what.
Yeah, it's something that we're just engulfed in since, right? So do you think that if you had seen the movies then, or without having seen so much action movies, you might feel differently?
I don't think so. I mean, there is a possibility, but I think that it's just that I just don't feel like the action leads to anything. Like Quentin Tarantino, the action and the violence in those movies, or Die Hard, like we talked about, I think that the action and the violence leads to something. Is a crescendo. So I think that's the one thing I think that's missing is like this as a crescendo. You know, I feel like this has more akin to like and I don't think these are as bad as that, but like the bad Chuck Norris movies or Steven Seagal movies, Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, just like where it's just action for action's sake. You know, it's the musical for musical's sake. You know, like there's not really much. That's how I feel about it, at least. Yeah,
and I think there's certainly a point to that, and there's obviously a lot of knockoff type films or films in this vein that are B movies, and I guess like I can totally see how like this would fit into the genre like alongside those films. But even with a genre like a cheesy genre of films that are generally bad, like I think there's those ones where you can see like, oh, they're doing it right? Like I guess maybe an example would be like 50 sci-fi films, like you know, The Day the Earth Stood Still and Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Blob.
Those would be movies, I guess, that transcended the genre. So like, yeah, sure, they're B movies or what we expect to be B movies, but then they transcend and they say something more. Whereas I don't think that these movies transcend above their genre.
I don't think they transcend by saying something, but I think in terms of style and just I guess flair and like flamboyance,
yeah,
they kind of transcend in a way that I do enjoy. I definitely don't like love either one of these movies. If I really like love one or I was like inclined to watch one again, it might be Hard Boiled.
Yeah, I mean that's the one I like the better. So maybe we should talk about that. But I think maybe you're right. Maybe Michael Bay, like watching slow motion from Michael Bay and these action sequences that I don't enjoy. Like going to this, which is like baby Michael Bay. I'm just like, I just kind of roll my eyes at the slow motion and the, like, so.
Yeah, I think it's just a consequence of where we've come from film since then,
And going back to them, like, I mean, I had actually tried to watch Hard Boiled before, and I think I liked it until the warehouse scene, and then I was kind of just like, well, like it feels like a bad action movie. And then I watched them, and I still probably feel that way. I think that there is merit to these films, and to see, like, they have their place in cinema history. It's just that I don't necessarily appreciate them as much as maybe some other people do.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I guess maybe the last point that I would want to talk about with The Killer is the cop in the end kills the bad guy who killed Chow Yun-fat, like right in front of everybody when he doesn't need to, and he can just arrest him. And
it was honor. Like he needed to have the honor, the revenge, honor of revenge, I think.
Yeah, and so going back to our conversation earlier of like, he started by killing somebody that he maybe didn't necessarily have to, but then he's not killing Chow Yun-fat. Like, I guess he kind of comes full circle back to where he started in the film, like as a character arc.
What did you think about the very end? So Chow Yun-fat dies and he's blinded, and he's crawling towards his female friend, who is also blind by this point. And then they can't even find each other. That was a kind of a sad ending for Chow Yun-fat's character. Did she die too? Because we don't see her after that.
I don't think she died because she's getting carried off by, like, she's getting helped by someone who's like at the church.
Yeah,
I think.
That might be. The women in this movie are very inconsequential. They are just people to take care of. Like.
It doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
I think there's just one, right? The Bechdel test, yeah. But even it's way below that. So Chow Yun-fat gets... So the bad guy in The Killer has the woman with a gun to the head, and they're going to do their thing where their little plan so they can kill the bad guy, even though... And so in that plan, Chow Yun-fat gets shot and killed. And there's a shot where, so the woman, and they also get the bad guy, and the woman falls down on the ground but can't see, so she's like crawling around on the ground. And then, of course, the bromance is happening, and so the cop goes to Chow Yun-fat and is just like holding him there, and you can see the poor girl, nobody cares about her. She's like crawling in the distance, and you're like, well, the only reason she's in the movie is so you can. It's the same reason the kid's in the movie, right? Is so you can. So there's you can
develop your male character.
Yeah, and like Chow Yun-fat more.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving into Hard Boiled, is there anything like specific? I don't know that we need to go through the plot too much. Like, it's very similar, except that both characters are cops. One is undercover. At first, he doesn't like him. They have like a bromance. They get together, and we end with like a giant shootout in a hospital where there's arms deals happening. Right?
These have got to be the worst cops. Also, I like
everybody in both movies for sure.
I think that was in my notes. I wrote "worst cops ever?" ?
Yeah, and so something specific about the opening of Hard Boiled that I guess I noted. I guess because it's sort of the equivalent of making us like the main character or see that like they're not quite as hard boiled as maybe some of the other characters. But we open with Chow Yun-fat, and he's like playing jazz, like in like a jazz band in a nightclub. And I don't know. Do you think the intention was like, look at this guy, he plays jazz, like he's not all bad?
Well, I read that that John Woo was is a big fan of jazz. So like that he wanted the jazz to be part of that. I think it's the same reason you give him the harmonica in The Killer. You know, it's an easy way to humanize him and for you to like him. Like, I like this hobby, you know, like
yeah, does that work for you?
No, because it feels cheap.
Yeah.
It feels easy.
Yeah, I've you know, read a lot about like screenwriting and stuff, and there's some article I read that was just like going on about like just because your character has like a hobby doesn't mean that they're actually have like is a well fleshed out character.
Yeah, that's not a 3-dimensional character.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that happens a little bit in this one. I guess the other thing, which we kind of talked about a little bit, like that tea house that they go to at the very beginning
with the birds.
There's a bunch of birds and birds in cages while they're drinking tea, and it seems like they're handed a bird in a cage, right?
I thought they went. I didn't notice that they were handed one, but it could be.
I don't remember them walking in with the bird in a cage. Maybe they did, but if they got it beforehand, it's like a sure like big coincidence that everybody else got a bird beforehand.
Same cage. Well, I mean, it's like you go to a dog-friendly bar, so everybody's going to have dogs at this bar. I don't think it's a coincidence. You know, you go to a bird bar, a bird-friendly tea house. Yeah. They may have given them out. Like, that may be a thing that they do. I just
thought it was interesting, and I guess I don't know if that's a thing that, as in like Chinese culture. I kind of tried to look it up, like, and I didn't have a whole lot of time this time to research that sort of thing, but it looked like I saw some images of people in bars where like everybody had a bird in a bird cage. So I don't know if it's a thing, but classic John Woo.
Birds.
To bring in some birds that can flap around in slow motion.
We're going to need more birds in this movie.
Yeah.
So the bad guy in Hard Boiled, did he look like the farmer bro, Martin Skelly?
I don't know who that is.
That's the guy that bought
okay.
Yeah, he was Asian. He's like the Asian version of Farmer Bro. I can't pronounce his last name. Shkreli. Yeah.
This is the guy who bought the insulin.
No, it was an AIDS medication, I believe.
Okay, AIDS medication.
So he bought it, and it was really cheap, and then he like made the prices go way up. Anyways, maybe it's not that they look so much similar, but they have like the same kind of like I want to punch him in the face look. You know, like smarmy, like douchebag look.
Yeah. I think the villain was well cast in that sense. Like, you just have to look at his face and know, like,
you're like, I don't like that guy.
That guy sucks. Yeah. Don't like him. Want him to die, or get arrested, I guess, depending on what kind of person you are.
Right.
I think this movie, more so than The Killer, had those action moments that actually did like get me really excited. Like, there's certainly a lot of action in The Killer, but some of it was like action for action's sake, and some of it didn't quite like get my blood pumping. I was just kind of watching it and taking it in. But there was this one moment, and I actually had to like rewind the movie and video it with my cell phone and send it to you. Yeah. Be like, check this out if you haven't watched Hard Boiled yet. And it's this part in one of the scenes towards the middle of the movie, but this guy
in the warehouse.
There's guys riding around on dirt bikes, and Chow Yun-fat gets on a dirt bike, and he just like jumps over this car and into like the back of a semi truck where a guy's like standing shooting at him, and he just like full speed rams through this guy and rams this guy into like a bunch of boxes and obviously kills him.
Yeah.
And
the guy just like disappears.
Yeah. It's like really, really brutal. And I really enjoyed that. I was happier watching this film because I had a few of those moments that like kind of made me like almost like laugh out loud. And like want to cheer a little bit.
Right. And I think towards the end, like in the hospital, there were some moments like that as well. The baby, of course, is just like at that point, it's like when his pants are on fire for some reason, and he's holding the baby, and the way the pants get put out is the baby pees. And he's like, good job. And at that point, it's like, it's not taking itself seriously. And if the whole movie had been that, you know, like, I think I would have enjoyed it more. But, like, because of the other stuff and I think the slow motion kills it for me. I think I like an action movie. Like, I want to have to be trying to keep. I like an action movie. I want to try. I want to have to keep up with what's going on. Does that make sense? I kind of want to know where everything is, but as soon as you do slow motion, like it just kind of takes me out of it. Like, and so that's
any slow motion, or do you think there was just maybe too much slow motion?
Well, we just talked about Star Wars in our last episode, and that had slow motion, and I didn't necessarily have a problem with it because it was kind of like it highlighted a certain moment, and then it would go back to the action sequence. Maybe it's because I was already tired of the action sequence, and then the slow motion
made it even longer.
Yeah, like if anything, fast forward motion.
Please, yeah.
Which actually, I think they did in the. Oh, there's a couple of things here. So I think they did that because they're fighting. It's like a long take, and they go inside this room, and I think they kind of sped it up a little bit as they were going in there.
Yeah, I think there is that long take in this movie where they're going from room to room and like fighting, and that's a big thing that had a huge influence on cinema since then. And Tarantino does a good bit of long takes. I think some of that came from Scorsese too, which I think Scorsese probably had.
Mean Streets actually was another one that was supposedly influenced John Woo.
Yeah. Scorsese both influenced John Woo and then those other directors, but like the long take action sequence.
How many windows do you think they broke? The cop and then the other honorable bad guy. How many windows do you think they went through?
I don't know. I should have had a calculator.
Yeah, we should have and that's a problem with these movies. So like if they've lost you, you're just like, how many mirrors are they going to jump, or windows are they going to jump through? And by the end, the undercover cop has glass in his face sticking out. and they just like for no reason they're like window, and then they jump through it and they're running.
That's one of those things that like if you're thinking of all the people that like aren't on screen, like this is a big thing that happened with Man of Steel that everyone was complaining about. Like they have this huge action sequence where they're destroying buildings and stuff, and like, what about all the people like in the building? And if you're thinking about that while you're watching the movie,
the movie's lost you.
It's probably not a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing, speaking of that, would be like it's kind of tough to watch this movie too. The other thing that occurs to me is, like mass shootings. They're in a hospital. These guys, the bad guys, are just shooting indiscriminately people, and I just can't imagine. Like that occurred to me as well. Like this really happens. Not.
Yeah, to an extent. I think I can separate like someone going in with the intent to harm innocent people, right? Like, and it being one person going in, and then like an action sequence that happens to take out. I don't quite feel that.
Yeah, that
sting.
I think it's the it lost me, and so that's what I'm thinking about, right? And I'm just like, if the movie hadn't have lost me, I probably wouldn't have as much of an issue with it. But like, you just like these people just shooting up a hospital, and all these poor babies that they're stacking like Legos as they try to.
Yeah. Another scene that got me like on the edge of my seat is when the one guy is carrying the baby down the rope and he gets shot. And he just like starts to fall over, but he's still got like he's like probably 15 feet in the air with like a baby. I'm like head in my hands like baby. Please don't. And there's a lot of that in this movie where like really successful action moments, and I think the killer is part of like John Woo-ness. I think he's really like in form when it comes to Hard Boiled. Like he's like gone full John Woo.
Yeah. And the other thing too that we could speak to is this was like 134 days of shooting, where the killer was only 90. They spent 40 days doing the hospital sequence alone, is what I read.
Man.
Yeah.
that's insane.
It was a long sequence.
Yeah. And I guess a big thing that I noticed with the end of this versus the end of the killer, and the killer, the main character, dies. I think the girl gets away. The cop shoots the bad guy when he doesn't need to. He could just arrest him, right? And this one, everybody lives, and everybody gets kind of a happy ending, right? Like Chow Yun-fat ends up with the girl. The other cop who we think might have died. We find out they burn his file, so there's no trace of him as an undercover cop or whatever. And then he's like sailing off, going to live the rest of his life, and he's out, right? So we get like happy ending versus a downer ending, right? And I mean, I don't know. What did you make of that? Did you like either ending better? Or did you like either? And you don't have to like one better. Did you hate them both? Did you like them?
I mean, yeah, I guess I'm kind of nonplussed. I mean, I think we could say that, you know, in the killer, they're bad guys, or he started off as a bad guy. Usually, they get their comeuppance by the end of the movie. You know, like one last job, but he's morally redeemed because he tried to do something good. You know, but. And then, of course, they were both cops, and the one undercover one had to do bad things and was haunted by those things he had to do. So he finally got to escape. So I think just by the genre of the characters alone, it dictates the endings, right?
Maybe so. And I guess it was just the ultra happy ending.
What did you think? Did you like one better than the other?
I mean, I've always been one kind of for downer endings because sometimes they feel more realistic. Yeah. And I buy them more and get a little more emotion out of them. And so sometimes, depending on the film, like I'm a sucker for a happy ending and like a romance, like a romantic comedy,
of course,
or a musical. Like I'm a huge sucker for the two main characters like finally getting over and like kissing in the end and like the end popping up as they're kissing or something. Like I'm a bit of a sucker for that. But
I want a romantic comedy to end. Like The Killer. For no reason, there's just a shootout.
That might exist. I don't know. We'll just do research. So is there anything else like specifically about the two movies? Any points in each one that you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of right now. Probably in an hour from now, I'll have some more stuff.
Sure. That's what inevitably always happens. I guess the one last thing is that we have so much violence in this film, and I guess we kind of touched on it a little bit when you started thinking about like modern shootings and mass shootings and things like that. Did you hit a point where the violence is like there's so much violence and it's so over the top and cartoonish that like you're not attached to any of it? Like you kind of get detached and like it no longer becomes violence. So like for example with The Killer, when the little girl was shot, I was like kind of surprised. I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's kind of one of those moments that brought me back into like, oh, this is like really violent. But for the rest of the films, for the most part, like the violence is so over the top that it becomes like cartoonish and it doesn't feel real anymore. And I'm no longer emotionally motivated by
or involved
violence
in what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think also like if we had a moment with the numerous bad guys, the like basically unending amount of minions that each bad guy in each film had. It's just like hundreds of people that they sent. You know, like if we had a moment like we did with a little girl, like we would have felt bad. But like it's just these guys running around the corner. It reminded me of you ever play those old arcade games like where you have the gun and like somebody peeks around the corner and you like the bad guy? That's what it reminded me of. Like somebody peeks around the corner, you shoot at them, or like three of them start to run at you.
Time Cop was a big one.
Time Cop. And you just got to shoot them, you know, like, and it's just an unending amount of bad guys. So like 3 people run down the corridor, they shoot all 3 of them, and then 3 people run from this direction in the corridor, and they shoot all 3 of them. And it's the same reason like the stormtroopers, you can't see their faces, you know, because they're dehumanized. You don't want to feel bad for the bad guys.
Well, I think I'm done talking about Hard Boiled and The Killer.
Yeah, so we got through our 2 movie podcasts. We'll see. I think our next multiple movie podcast is the Samurai trilogy.
Yeah,
right?
We'll do the same thing we did this time. We'll watch all 3 Samurai.
I think
films
that one
talk about them.
It's coming up here pretty soon, but we'll do all 3 films, and that's more like one story as opposed to separate films. So we'll kind of talk about it as like one story, one movie. Yeah.
So, do you want to tell them what next week's film is?
Absolutely. Next week's film, for anybody that's ever watched Lost, is a cool title. It's Spine Number 10, Walkabout by Nicholas
Rogue? I think it's just Rogue.
Rogue.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah, Nicholas Rogue. We'll get that figured out by next week.
Yeah, have you seen this one before?
I haven't. I really want to. I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I watched it once, but I think it was at this point like 7-8 years ago. I remember it being really interesting and really cool, and I mean, not cool, I guess, in the sense that it's really fun, but just like a different film. Like Nicholas Rogue, some of his films are, kind of out there and a little bit offbeat and different. So I remember this one being similar. And I guess the last reference is there's a title of an episode called Walkabout, right?
Yeah, that was the whole thing was
it John Locke's
John
character?
Locke went on a walkabout. Yeah. Or tried to. Spoiler alert.
Well, let's do our top 3.
Yeah. Great minds think alike. So what is our top 3 this week?
Our top 3 this week is 80s action films. And that obviously goes along with John Woo. We talked about doing 90s action films, but Chris wouldn't let me because he just thought I would add The Big Hit again.
We haven't talked about The Big Hit, so I watched it.
Yeah, let's talk about The Big Hit real quick.
Yeah. Real quick before our top 3, ask me what I thought.
I'm afraid to, because I feel like you're either going to have an answer, and I feel like you might have an answer that I'm not going to like, and then I'm going to get fired up.
And then we're going to go on for another 45 minutes.
Yes, we're just going to keep beef. Okay, what did you think about it?
What I will say is The Big Hit, to me, was more fun than either one of our Criterion movies this week. Because it's just goofy, but it was bad. And
John Woo's a producer on The Big Hit too, by the way.
Yeah. It's bad. To me, it's so bad that it's good. I mean, I think the thing that the epitome of this film, or what makes it so bad that it's good, is at some point, I forget who it is, but they're driving a car. I think it's Mark Wahlberg. The car goes off the cliff and falls in a tree, and then we never see how they get out of the car and back onto like solid ground. Yeah. I think like that makes it so bad it's good.
Yeah, and I'll try not to get too deep into it. Maybe we just need to do a Big Hit episode next week and do a deep dive on The Big Hit.
Let's
which I'm totally into whenever you want. But I think that saying the film is so bad it's good is like the easy way out. It's like the easy answer. But like, I think it's so much deeper than that. And I don't know if you remember specifically what I've said about it, but like I consider it to be the Cabin in the Woods to the John Woo film, in that it's doing a lot of the things that the John Woo films does, but having fun with it and like nodding to you that it is like in the film, they kidnap a girl and they're going to ask the dad for ransom, and they're an Asian family, and like he's supposed to be this like super rich Asian guy that is the girl's dad. And when they call him up for the ransom, we find out that he has blown all of his money writing, directing, producing, and starring in the most expensive film ever made.
What was it called?
Taste the Golden Spray.
Okay.
So, and any film that has like that sort of ridiculous like plot element to it, that's like, it's a movie joke, right? And so it's like there's so many like winks and nods that like we know what we're doing. I'll try not to get into it. We can leave it at that.
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, I think it. If that was its goal, then it did it so well that it like they made a bad movie without telling anybody else they made a bad movie. And the other thing that's really problematic about this movie is Mark Wahlberg kidnaps that girl from high school, mind you, and then they have like this scene, where there's like some chocolate on her leg or something, and you're just like, this is gross and not appropriate at all. And they end up getting like not married, but they go on a
They end up together.
Yeah, they end up together in the end, and that's just even worse.
I think that's a bit of a weird thing. I guess I was never sure if was she in high school or was she in college.
I'm pretty sure it was high school. They don't make you wear uniforms in college.
Yeah, I guess not. I didn't know if it was like, I don't know, some weird private school, but maybe it is high school. And I'll give you that is like a weird point, but I just said there's no way that like the movies, but There's other reasons, and if we ever do a deep dive on the film, I'll get into that with you. But there's like specific scenes and like actions and like camera framing and everything that's in the scene that like I think is the filmmaker screaming at you of like, we know what we're doing, here you go. But
maybe we'll do an extra episode. Like next time we get together, we can do 15, 30 minutes and we can talk about the big hit, and we'll just put it out at some other point.
I'm in.
Okay.
So back to the top three.
But wait, I wanted to say thank you because I did have a really good time watching it. I watched it with this girl, and we just got to make fun of it the whole time.
You did it wrong. You're laughing with it. You're not making fun of it or laughing at it. You're laughing with it. I promise.
All right. Well, I had a good time. That's all that matters, right? Like, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the top three. Top three 80s action films. Chris, what is your first?
Well, when I first suggested this as our top three, I thought that there might be, it might be more difficult, but there's actually some pretty good 80s action movies. Maybe we should have said cheesy 80s action movies. Anyways, Lethal Weapon is my first pick. Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, he's too old for this shit. I really like Lethal Weapon. And the Lethal Weapon series eventually does get really cheesy and goofy, but the first one is pretty good. I like that one.
I've never seen it.
What?
I've never seen Lethal Weapon. It's been on my list to watch forever, and I just have never got around to it.
Well, you've got time over Christmas break.
I think I have to watch it. Like, I love Rush Hour so much, as we've talked about on previous. I think Lethal Weapon might be up my alley. Just one I've never.
Well, the first one's a little bit more serious than like a Rush Hour, or I mean, there's definitely the goofy buddy comedy, but there's more seriousness to it.
That's fine. I don't mind serious. Okay, well, my first one, and I'm doing these in no particular order, except I'm maybe saving my favorite for last, assuming you don't name it. But Aliens. James Cameron's Aliens, and this movie gets a lot of hate, at least a lot from my friends. Don't like it, and it's kind of cheesy, and obviously I think the first Alien is a better movie and more interesting movie because it's more suspenseful and a bit more of like horror suspense than like straight up action. But I just enjoy everything about this one. I love Bill Paxton in it, whining a lot. Game
over, man.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love it, and
it's a good movie. I like it a lot.
I think if there's any problems with it, one of my friends pointed out to me once, and I kind of can't unsee it, but he complains that like in every James Cameron like action-ish movie, with Titanic excluded, that it's like there's always this moment where they dispatch like the big bad person at the end, and then they're about to get away, but then they come back one last time for one last little battle, and he's really annoyed by that. And I guess like the fact that it happens every time in every James Cameron movie is a little annoying now that
happens in a lot of movies. Like to lay that at James Cameron's feet seems.
Well, I don't think he's the only one doing it necessarily, but to do it always for James Cameron to always do it every time, like it gets a little tired on James Cameron's part.
Yeah,
I guess. But that might be my only complaint about it. But otherwise, I just really love it, and I think it's a fun movie.
All right, my next one is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Over the other.
Justin just made this crazy face that made me go into a coughing fit.
Yeah. Temple of Doom over the other Indiana Jones movies?
Were they all in the 80s? Yeah. And the reason
think some of them are the other. At least Raiders was in the 80s.
Yeah. I don't know that I actually saw Raiders in the 80s. I saw Temple of Doom in the 80s.
I didn't see any of these in the 80s because I was 6 at most.
Okay. Well, I guess. But I saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and it scared the crap out of me. But I really liked it, and was kind of my introduction into that world and to Steven Spielberg, and you can't beat Short Round.
No, Short Round's great. Yeah. Short Round's great. You can beat the woman in it because not literally, not physically, but yeah, she can be bested by other women in action adventure films because she's a little annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the woman is better in the first one, and then, of course, the fourth one when she comes back.
Yeah, but I do like Temple of Doom. I actually like all of the Indiana Jones. Even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull I kind of like. So
everybody hates Temple of Doom, but whatever.
No, that's fine. I was just surprised. I don't hate it. I was just surprised that you chose it over Last Crusade or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
I just remember I was over, like it was a sleepover or it was like a Halloween party or something, and the movie was on, and I just sat down there, and the party was going on all around me, and I just watched the movie the whole time, which actually speaks to my adulthood as well.
There you go. Okay, my second one is an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, but maybe not the one you think. Commando.
I was going to guess. Commando, really?
Yeah.
Why?
And a part of this goes back to just how much I watched it as a kid, because I watched it all the time. Like when I would go visit my dad in the summers, and he had a blank VHS that he had recorded Commando on it. So it had the little strip, and he had like wrote in pen like Commando on it. I just recorded it off of TV or HBO or something. And I used to watch that movie over and over and over again. So like kind of has like a soft spot for me. I recognize it's pretty cheesy, but it does have some like really great lines where there's a part early on when he's in an airplane, and one of the bad guys comes on the airplane with him, and he like subtly kills him. And so then he's sitting in the airplane, and then the stewardess comes up, and he puts like a blanket over his face, and he's like, "Excuse me, please don't disturb my friend. He's dead tired."
That's not funny.
It's not. It isn't. You're right, but it gets me, and it's just really fun. And that has a huge action sequence at the end. The guy gets stabbed through the stomach with the pipe, and the steam is coming out, and he says, "You need to let off some steam," or something like that.
Oh my God.
To him.
I've never seen
So fun.
it, and now I don't think I ever will.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right, so my last one, and I think it goes well with the time of year that it is, Die Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Die Hard, out of 80s action films, and maybe somebody can name a different one that can change my mind, but out of 80s action films, the first Die Hard is by far the best that I know of. It's well structured.
It's really good.
Yeah, just a really great movie. Yeah, so Die Hard's my last one. Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah. What did you think of the subsequent Die Hards? A lot of people like Die Hard 3 the best, and that's honestly one of my least favorites.
I like 3, not the best. I like 3 because, I mean, it's basically Lethal Weapon, except for Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis. I don't think any of them measure up to Die Hard, the first one. Yeah. You know,
to be fair, I haven't seen Die Hard 5, whatever the latest one that has like his son in it. So
don't.
I hear it's really bad. So I assume the Die Hard 3 with a Vengeance is better than that one.
Yeah, well, 4 and 5 are both worse. And famously, I think Roger Ebert, back when they were both alive, Roger Ebert and
Gene Siskel.
One of them put Die Hard 2 in their top 10 list at the end of the year, and they like argued about it very strongly, and that's fun to watch if you can go find that episode.
Yeah,
I think it was Die Hard 2. Maybe it's just Die Hard, but anyways, yeah,
cool.
That's my last one.
All right, my last one. This one popped up on an 80s action list. I was kind of hesitant to include it, but I guess if I included Aliens, I could certainly include this. But Big Trouble in Little China.
Absolutely. I saw that. I mean, I didn't see the movie, actually, but I saw that on the list, and I was like, I wonder. And Escape from New York was the other one I thought that you might put.
Yeah, I thought about it, because I guess you know, just from hanging out with me, that like I just love Kurt Russell. Mm-hmm. I love him in everything, and I think he just makes just about anything he's in better. And
see Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
I did not see Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but
Kurt Russell's in
for
there.
Reasons we've discussed previously. That might be the one reason that makes me watch it.
He can bump it up from a 7 to an 8.
He might. Probably not. If anything, I imagine it might be more like a 5 to a 6, but we'll see. Yeah, Big Trouble in Little China, it's super fun. Jack Burton, one of the greatest characters in cinema history, I think. And yeah, I really like it. I could watch it endlessly. I watched it a bunch as a kid on cable, like with commercials. So I remember the first time I watched it on DVD, I was probably 21, 22, and I'd seen the film dozens and dozens of time, and I finally watched it like without commercials.
It's
because I never
Life.
owned it.
Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life was that way for me. Like I knew everything that happened in it, but I've never actually watched it, in sequence before.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that does it.
I guess that ends our episode for today.
Yep, and as always, I want to thank you, the listener, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you haven't reviewed us on iTunes, you should also go ahead and review us on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review, even if you hate us. 5-star review
Absolutely
helps. Just be nice and give us. It's that time of year. Tis the season to give 5-star reviews on iTunes, I think.
But specifically to our podcast.
Yeah. I mean, give them to other podcasts. I don't care.
Well, us and
That's
other
fine.
podcasts.
Yeah, but at least
do
us.
ours first.
Yeah. Okay, and also we want to thank Jake Wagner-Russell for creating our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more music of his, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch. And as always, you can follow us to keep up with what's going on in the show. Give us your feedback. Tell us how we're stupid for picking the top 3 80s action films that we did, and you can rip into me for liking Commando. That's fine.
Or The Big Hit.
You can rip into me for liking The Big Hit, but that one I will fight with you on, and civilly, of course. But yeah, so if you want to contact us, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at casualcriterion. And if you just want to email us straight up, you can email us at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
All right, thanks so much for listening to the episode. We'll see you next week. And until then, goodbye.
Bye-bye.